Today, the panel unpacks Joe Biden's speech from the first night of the Democratic National Convention and the numerous women who joined the stage in support of Kamala Harris. Protests escalate outside the DNC, and Blaze Media national correspondent Julio Rosas gives us an update from Chicago. And is the election a simulation? BlazeTV host James Poulos thinks so, and he will join us to explain his reasoning. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Tuesday, August 20th. Last night, President Joe Biden closed the Democratic National Convention with a speech, and he was introduced by his daughter, Ashley Biden. Here to unpack this all for us is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze Media, and Michael Malice, author and host of You're Welcome. So, Michael, let's start with you. Thanks for joining us. What do you make of Joe Biden's speech in just night one of the DNC?
Well, I think there's some kind of ironic punishment that Joe Biden has been this loyal party hack for decades. And now, even though he's ostensibly the president and still the leader of the free world and one of the most powerful men on earth, no one really cares what he has to say. It's kind of a joke. And this is kind of his punishment. You know, overnight, that party that he was so loyal to, that he walked the plank for, that he did what he was told for so many years, threw into the trash. He was only a point or two behind President Trump, and very publicly, they just couldn't wait to stab him, not in the back, but in the front. So I can understand why he's angry. But it's kind of, I remember showing my age a few years ago, I don't remember what year, Gerald Ford spoke at the Republican convention, and they put him at like 4 o'clock, and there were like tumbleweeds, and you could hear wolves baying. It was just a complete joke. And I'm just glad that this is the end of his career, you know, where they kick him out of prime time. And it's kind of a speech that no one really cares about one way or another, no matter what your political persuasion happens to be.
Michael, we'll drill down on Biden some more, but tell us, what was your takeaway for the DNC's message as a whole on this opening night? Like, what were they trying to say to you?
I think Kamala Harris's biggest constituency is highly educated, highly mentally ill white women. And this entire convention is going to be speaking to that group. There's this air of enforced joy, which is a function of those SSRIs that they're all on, and this sense of like inevitability, kind of trying to hopefully to meme it into reality. But I wouldn't wish this on anyone, because think about it. If you have a 3 months to put together a presidential campaign with a candidate who's tried and failed so badly that she didn't even make Iowa last time, it's going to be really an uphill slog. And the key to watch, I think, for most people is the down ticket races. So Tester's already behind in several polls in Montana. West Virginia is obviously a write-off for the Democrats. So those are already two pickup seats for the Republicans in the Senate. So if dominoes keep falling, it's going to look really, really bad. And the thing with Kamala Harris, as we saw in 2020, the more she talks, the more people are alienated by her. The first policy position out of her mouth, which is this price gouging nonsense, when you have the Washington Post and CNN telling you, lady, you're out of your mind, this is a real problem for your campaign.
Michael, I don't know if the white women love the illegal immigration, but Joe Biden certainly did last night. Let's go ahead and listen to his remarks.
When Donald Trump left office, and unlike Trump, we will not demonize immigrants, saying they're the poison of blood of America, poison the blood of our country. Kamala and I are committed to strengthening legal immigration, including protecting dreamers and more.
You're laughing. What?
He said Kamala.
Yeah, he did. She's plural now. She's multiplying right in front of our eyes at the DNC. But they love illegal immigration. That's what they're saying, Michael.
Well, when you're talking about blood poisoning, maybe he was referring to what his doctor told him, and he just got a little bit confused. It happens to the best of us, especially as, I'm getting a little gray myself. The Democratic Party, of course, needs immigration to kind of fuel its base. It's increasingly becoming unpopular with traditional Americans, and I say this as an immigrant. So it makes perfect sense that they're going to have those borders open as much as possible. But the more sinister aspect of this, and Dinesh D'Souza has spoken about this among others, is when you have increased crime, that tends to mean people want increased government as an excuse to have that security. And that is playing into their hands very well, especially with an authoritarian like Tim Walz, who has never met an authoritarian edict he didn't like.
Well, let's go ahead. Biden also was going out and repeating the very fine people lie last night. Let's take a listen to that.
The president was asked what he thought had happened. Donald Trump said, and I quote, "There are very fine people on both sides. My God." That's what he said. That is what he said and what he meant.
That is not what he said, but that's what they're still going to be pretending that he said, Michael.
I remember 5,000 years ago when President Trump was shot and almost murdered on national television.
Yeah.
And Joe Biden said, we need to stop demonizing one another. And this is getting too far. People are getting, shot and almost assassinated. So that went out the window, just immediately. So the thing, but I think that people need to appreciate is that lies work in politics. Unless you have an independent media, which we obviously do not remotely have in this country, there's no consequence for Joe Biden to repeating this line over and over. And the media will just cover for him and say, well, it's not literally true, but it's ostensibly true, or whatever term that they use as a euphemism. So I don't blame him. And frankly, when Dianne Feinstein, toward the end of her career, was sat down reportedly by Chuck Schumer and told she has to resign, and she agreed and then forgot about the conversation, we don't know that if Biden was maybe told the facts and then just went in one ear and went out the other.
Yes. Let's talk about this big picture, because you've said two different things here that I feel strongly and I wrestle with right now. One is the lies matter because the lies work. So, the sort of, maybe you call it the black pill side of this, or whatever you want to call it. It's, look, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They're just saying out loud. They're not even trying to go to the moderates. They're not even trying to hide the same lies they said for years. Either you get it or you don't. 40% of the country is versus 40% of the country, no matter what. And in between, you just lie your way through, and they don't care. And they're not. There's not even a hint of trying to go to any independent or moderate. They don't care. On the other end of it is what you said earlier, which is, I'm watching the SSRI show. Can we really watch this freak show? As I said earlier, I said on Twitter, it's like The Acolyte was picked up. It was canceled by Disney, but it was picked up by the DNC. And so this freak show, surely people won't be into this. So you got these two things in tension. What do you think? How do you think it plays out?
Well, I mean, did anyone really think Mexico was going to pay for the wall that Trump was going to build? Politicians, even at the time, people laughed. They're like, all right, yeah, Mexico's going to pay for the wall. So there's degrees of lying. And sometimes it's just you kind of roll your eyes because it's, I wish Trump was telling the truth when he said if he was running the Justice Department, Hillary would be in jail. That never ended up happening either. I think you're talking about different groups. And the people who are not like us, political freaks who don't really pay attention to politics, they just work like by T-shirt slogans. You hear this very fine people, it becomes kind of mimetic, and you kind of stigmatize Trump in that regard. Those SSRI women, the wine moms and the awfuls, the affluent white female liberals, they're really into politics, and their entire identity is a function of politics. And they're, the ones who were so in love with President Trump, they were on their heads and marched up and down the streets yelling how much they cared about him. So these are kind of different populations. And insofar as that latter population has a voice, I think the more malevolent and dangerous it's going to be for Americans. And you saw the pushback enormously about what J.D. Vance said. And thankfully for him, he kind of doubled down on his point because I think it was a valid one.
Michael, I want to switch gears a little bit with you because back in the 90s, Tim Walz taught high school students about the alleged virtues of communism after he had a great experience, he said, in China. So according to an archived newspaper, Walz praised the Chinese communist system, saying, quote, "It means that everyone is the same and everyone shares. The doctor, the construction worker, they make the same. The Chinese government, they place the work and provide housing for about 30 pounds of rice per month. They get food, they get housing. So you lived in the Soviet Union. So what are your thoughts on this take?
Well, I lived there till I was 2, to be fair. I just wrote a book about it called The White Pill. But Tim Walz has publicly said that he's not a First Amendment guy, that he believes in kind of hate speech laws. We are seeing that 2020 and COVID showed a lot of very evil people, a lot of very useful information about the limits of American submission and what it would take for Americans to be like, all right, we reached a line we can't cross. And we're seeing it play out right now in the UK. Keir Starmer, the new prime minister from the Labour Party, is this kind of almost out of Dilbert gray man, corporate hack. You would never spot him in a crowd. And the kind of tyranny that he's unleashing, arresting people for tweets or making the wrong expression toward others, is something that we would have considered unimaginable, let's say, 7 or 8 years ago in a pre-COVID era. And that's exactly what Tim Walz represents. I'm not as concerned about his ideology of equality, which I think, broadly speaking, everyone in the Democratic Party subscribes to some extent. I'm more worried about how comfortable he is using authoritarianism to implement his edicts. And the thing to bring in mind is necessarily his trips to China, but when he was governor, he had that snitch line to turn in your neighbors. And that is a hallmark of every tyrannical government, because you're only going to have so many cops. You need the buy-in from the citizenry to kind of enforce your tyranny and decrees. And that's exactly what he represents. And that's why he's much more malevolent and dangerous than Officer Harris, in my opinion.
We will keep screaming it from the rooftops. Michael, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Chris Bedford read the DNC platform, so you don't have to. He'll break it all down next. Well, there's nothing better at the end of a long day than sitting down in your favorite chair with a glass of your favorite whiskey. And if it turns out that with every glass, you're going to help support a great American cause, doesn't it make it that much better? Well, it's time to chart your own course with Flying Ace whiskeys from Craft Co. and Peterson. They've sent me some. It's really good.
I'm waiting to try it.
And it's even better because they're inspired by generations of American aviators, and they're proudly made right here in the United States. Flying Ace is not only making amazing whiskeys, but they're also committed to supporting our brave troops and their families through the partnership with Folds of Honor. And they're providing scholarships to families of America's fallen or disabled. And these scholarships allow families to begin to chart their new course after experiencing great sacrifice. Flying Ace whiskeys are American proud because they're American made, and they're American proud because they're helping to support our heroes and their families. So don't wait around. Today is the day to get your own. Peterson, I will share some with you. I absolutely promise it.
Can we drink on the show? Can we do that?
At some point we will be, because it's all the chaos. But go ahead and buy yours online right now at flyingacesspirits.com. Use code America to get free shipping. That's flyingacesspirits.com. Code America for free shipping. Several women took the stage last night at the Democratic National Convention, including Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, Hillary Clinton, and of course, Kamala Harris. Here to unpack their remarks is Blaze Media senior editor for Politics and Washington Correspondent Chris Bedford. So Chris, let's dive into the dream team of women for the DNC. Who stuck out to you the most?
Well, I mean, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez certainly did her best Eva Perón impression, somewhere between that and Mussolini. If you actually dug down into the context of what she was saying, beyond all the arm waving and screaming, it turned out it really ticked off a couple of the Democrat base who don't like that she said anything even remotely nice about getting back kidnapping victims, for example. Or as she talked about how Kamala Harris has apparently been working tirelessly to bring peace to the war in Israel. That's not true. That's not true at all. It's completely made up. And it was also, of course, refreshing to be reminded once every year, 2 years, 3 years, just how shrill and annoying Hillary Clinton is as a politician. Every aspect of that weird triumphalism that she always has, despite having really not won anything that was hard fought in her whole life. It was grating to the ears and kind of a reminder that this is the Democratic Party that loves Hillary Clinton. I mean, the whole evening was somewhat of a reminder that behind all the still photographs that show these Democrat leaders as ascendant politicians, behind all the glamorous reporting on them, when you actually get down to the Democrats themselves, it's an unimpressive and kind of strange lot.
Chris, I heard The Acolyte was canceled by Disney, but I think it was picked up this week by the DNC. I'm expecting Lesbian Space Witches by tomorrow, and the apparent virgin birth from that show. We should talk about the freak show aspect to this as well. But first, something that was really troubling and I think a really pathetic off note was when this Representative Joyce Beatty took the stage to bash J.D. Vance. And, you know, multimillionaire Democrat, as our headline says, right, bashes Vance for basically rising above poverty.
Well, I mean, that's not a completely shocking take for the Democratic Party. You could tune in to a DNC in 2024 or in 1974 too, or 1968, and you can hear Democrat politicians talking about how they're going to do more this for black voters or more that for black voters. And it's always the exact same promise because it's never actually realized. The bringing jobs to the community, bringing education to the communities, never actually realized. So it must be shocking to one of the black Democratic leaders to see someone who actually went out there and broke through that, whether they're black or white, in this case, J.D. Vance, who go out and say, well, I'm not going to stay. I'm going to get out of this bucket filled with crabs. That's what they call it, that symptom, the syndrome. When someone tries to get out of that bucket, their friends pull them down and try to say, no, you stay here. This is where you belong. J.D. Vance is someone who didn't leave behind his hillbilly roots. He's someone who grew from them, took a lot of lessons from them, wrote a best-selling memoir that was made into a movie about that, drew the lens back to their plight, ended up going to Yale and then representing his state, where he fights fairly tirelessly, not just against Democrats, but against Republicans and sometimes conservative Republicans to work on different bills that will help the people of his home state. I mean, you know how many Republicans he ticked off trying to take on the big train lobbyists, which are surprisingly powerful considering it's not 1864, it's 2024, still surprisingly powerful. And people kept on saying, why are you taking on this battle? And he said, because they blew up a town in my state. That's a major issue. These are people who aren't getting represented in D.C. It's no surprise, though, to see him being criticized. It's a dumb attack. It's not one I think that really is ringing out very well. And it's not just a one-off. You've heard this from Democrats now repeatedly. This is a line of attack that they intend to go on J.D. Vance's. How dare he try to better himself?
Well, Hillary Clinton demands our attention, so we're going to give her more than 20 seconds on this show because that is the way that she demands it. When I saw her last night, Chris, and the lock him up chants started and the little smirk came across her face, and you just think, how mad, how upset she is that she's not the one that is speaking on Thursday night. Instead, she has an opening Monday night time slot for the woman who thinks that she should have been president already. And now they're disgracing her, Chris, in this way.
The whole schedule seemed like it was set up to embarrass people. That's a really great point. You saw it with Joe Biden, who ended up being pushed to way past his bedtime at 11:30 to give his speech, which, by the way, is passed when all the battleground states have gone to sleep, most of them on the East Coast. Hillary Clinton up there as well. Monday night's not a big night for the DNC. It's opening night. At typical conventions, well, of course, the delegates will be there. You're not going to have the same kind of packed arena that you're going to get for later times. Hillary Clinton, of course, had to step back and give up the Tuesday booking to Barack Obama, who was supposed to be coming on this evening. There's a lot of just different passive-aggressive shivs toward different members of the Democratic Party who are considered the past, who are being pushed out of the way by the new Democrats.
Chris, let's talk about Joe Biden, because this is really remarkable. As many people have said, they made him give his own eulogy, and it was past his bedtime and past everyone else's. So tell us about that, what you're hearing about that, and what you think happened there.
It was kind of strange, wasn't it? I mean, it reminded me of the scene in Waking Ned Divine where they have a fake funeral and they have to go through it. And you end up eulogizing your friend who's right there in the front row. But at the same time, these were sweet eulogies, but they're from the same people who stabbed him in the back and threw him over. And despite Joe Biden saying that this was his decision and it was right, and trying to be a champ about it in his interviews before and after, and even kind of during his speech. You have his close aides and longtime allies furiously texting different reporters and outlets across town saying, I cannot believe that they're doing this to them. Less than a nice send-off or a Lifetime Achievement Award, which is always a bad sign when you get a Lifetime Achievement Award. It means your friends think you're on your way out. This seemed more like they were burying him alive, that this was the end. Joe Biden exit stage right.
Let's reiterate, he is still the current president of the United States, and this is how he's being treated. So I want to ask you, as everybody is pushing Joe Biden aside, Kamala Harris is making her presence known, and so much so that she had that surprise appearance last night on stage. Granted, it was less than 3 minutes that she was out there. They were, very quick with it just to make sure that she got her time to shine, though. So what do you make of her coming out and giving that little surprise appearance last night?
It seems like this is a new style of convention. We saw that with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, who were there for the whole entirety of the convention. Gone are the days, it seems, at least for now, when the actual principal flies in on the last day and isn't even in town. The whole gang is there for the whole week. And I know that the kind of principle there is you want to keep the people wanting more at the end of your appearance. So less is generally more. But with someone like Kamala Harris at the same time, they're leaving too much. They're leaving too much wanting. The press is wanting. No one's getting interviews. No one's getting questions. So I think that was one of the few smart moments of the evening, one of the better ideas of a rather poorly run evening. It was kind of amazing to read all the sad reporter stories this morning, how bummed out they were at how poorly run the DNC's been, how they can't find seats, they can't find outlets. But that part, just a little bit of foreshadowing for the speech to come, well, that makes some political sense.
I just want to go back to Biden's speech real quick, because I think this is important. I mean, the president of the United States did give a speech at this convention, passing the torch or whatever, his last speech. And I believe you were saying earlier, his people are very upset what happened to him. I mean, how could you not be? He was shelved to the very end. But his actual speech was incredible to me because it was so angry. I mean, this was angry Grandpa Joe, right? And maybe that's the joy of Wine Aunt Kamala, but this is something that most people, if they actually saw, would be appalled by, don't you think?
Yeah, and I don't think that they're really staying on the message that they want. For all his policies going in the opposite direction, maybe, Barack Obama gave lofty, hopeful speeches about change. He stuck to the hope and change thing. Kamala Harris is apparently going with joy. I mean, if you put AOC on mute, you could put down Mussolini's speech over her anytime, and it would make total sense. If you looked at Joe Biden's speech, the anger, the attacks, it did not say joy at all. If you see the politicians out there just attacking J.D. Vance for going to college, that didn't say joy. You'd think that if you're trying to strike that message, that at least you would try to stay on it when you're having your big choreographed show. Try to be uplifting. Try to paint a future that is bright, as opposed to just dark words about the future of democracy. So I don't know how much longer this joy thing's going to last. It's slamming up pretty hard against the words actually coming out of their mouths.
Chris, our last question for you. The DNC has released their platform. There's a ton of loaded stuff in there. What do you think is the most egregious thing in the platform this time around?
I mean, they've gone all in on the culture war, and that's something that previously there was a time in America where the culture war was being waged by the American right. I'm talking decades ago, before the Stonewall riots, where now, and Donald Trump really highlighted this, he was the first Republican president to really push back on all aspects of it. And since he pushed back, he ended up in fights with the NFL and fights with Hollywood and fights with big business because the culture war was in every aspect of it. The Democratic Party has embraced these things, and they've made it a central focal point. So it's interesting when you see Democrats out there talking about how this is all about the working class. This is about the people who are left behind, and these are about the people who work paycheck to paycheck. Well, that sounds like the old Democrat Party that AOC is talking about. At least that's what they tried to represent in the 80s and even the 90s a little bit. Now it's very much the party of white female college professors. I mean, these are the concerns that seem to be front and center. It's something that comes out in Harris's speech. It's something that's visible through the platform. And I don't see it really winning back the working class voters and the Black and Hispanic men in particular who have started to leave and move towards Donald Trump.
Well, Bedford, go ahead and pack some shorts and get your way down here to Dallas. We'll see you if the flights all are kind to us tomorrow here in studio.
Can't wait.
When we come back, the DNC is still bearing the brunt of mostly peaceful protests. National correspondent Julio Rosas will join us from Chicago coming up. Far-left protests have broken out just outside of the Democratic National Convention, mostly over the Biden-Harris administration's position on Israel. Yesterday, protesters breached an outer fence and police responded by arresting 4 people. So here to discuss is Blaze Media national correspondent Julio Rosas, who joins us now from Chicago. So Julio, have things quieted down a little bit since all of the chaos that we saw yesterday?
They have, but that's just because the protest for today is not till later this evening, and for the fact that it's expected that more people are supposed to show up for when Kamala Harris gives her acceptance speech on Thursday. So that's kind of a day to watch out for. But yeah, for now, things have kind of gone back to normal. We're still kind of waiting to see what exactly the response is going to be on the protester side, just because of the multiple breaches that happened yesterday, the Chicago police and the city has actually reinforced the barriers by not only adding a third line of security fencing, but they actually pulled a Donald Trump by making the fence 10 feet higher to prevent people from having an easier time from taking it down. So it was a day, right? I mean, yesterday was the first day of the convention, and the protesters wanted to let the people inside know that they were going to be outside, and they want them to bend to their demands.
The wall just got 10 feet higher. I see. Interesting there in Chicago. Drill into the atmosphere and the tension and the sort of energy that you sense among the protesters right now. And the other people there. I mean, are they excited? Are they determined? Are they ready to go charge in again? What does it feel like?
So yesterday, I mean, even at the start, there was some tension because the police, the Chicago police, were on either side of the march. They with the officers that were on bicycles, and so that's kind of how they were able to corral them, keep them to the approved parade route that the city said that they had to go on. If you remember last week, I was saying that the protesters wanted a longer route that would take them more along the security fence. And so that kind of was the initial tension, but things were fine during the actual march itself. But because the second park that they went to, the police then kind of gave them free reign of the park and went to the sides. And so that's why they had easy access to the security perimeter itself, because there was nobody stopping them from getting in between those two sides. So they did see yesterday as a victory, right? Because for the RNC, which we were at, this didn't even come close to happening, right? I mean, there was no breach. They did have a protest, but it was very, very mellow compared to what happened yesterday. So they view yesterday as a successful kind of disruption, just because it did draw a big police response, and the DNC was kind of blaming the shuttles not going over to the United Center, and that's why people had a hard time coming in, and there was like all these long lines or whatever. So so that's not to be discounted for sure, and so that's why we're going to kind of see what happens on Thursday when Harris officially accepts the nomination.
Julio, I've been smirking reading stories all day about the protests because Axios actually reported that these protests were mostly peaceful. And you've seen your fair share of mostly peaceful protests. So are these actually mostly peaceful, or are these what we would think of as, the BLM riots and everything else that's going there? Do they have that kind of vibe that they could get up to that level?
So, like I said, the march itself was fine. I mean, there wasn't really any issues with that. But as soon as they get a sense that they can get away with stuff, they're more than happy to take that. And so, if it wasn't for that second perimeter or that second fencing, and granted, it was way more flimsier than the first one that they breached, they could have gotten really close to the United Center, and they definitely wanted to do that. But I think it was they wanted to also kind of realize that it was a marathon, not a race, when it comes to this, because they didn't want everybody to be arrested on the first day, and even then only 4 people were arrested, and one of them was arrested at the very end when they were away from when they had been pushed out of the breach. So that one was actually kind of more avoidable than some of the others. So I think it definitely wasn't peaceful at the end of the day, but it could have been worse. But I think it's also because they wanted to kind of save the best for last, so to speak, for later for later.
Julio, what's the worst, craziest thing you've seen so far, either in terms of cringe or violence?
Well, there's no shortage of cringe, and I'm staying near where the DNC delegates are, and just those alone, that's a lot of cringe of itself. But for the street crazies, I would say, I mean, look, that fencing is very, very durable. I mean, it is temporary, but it's very durable. It's very heavy. So the fact that they were able to not remove just one piece, but multiple pieces, and they actually took away the fencing. So when police moved in, they were able to put back some of the pieces, but that's why they then had to clear the park, because they had to get to some of where the other pieces were lying because they were dragged away. I mean, that's significant. That's not a small thing to do. I mean, they risk significant repercussions potentially. But I think because the mayor and the police are kind of in this weird spot of, oh, well, we don't want to look like we're cracking down on peaceful people. They kind of have to let things get out of hand a little bit before they can actually respond, which was kind of the worry that Democrats had coming into this week. So I would say taking down the fence is probably the craziest thing. The most cringe thing was on the first day, where they had this little the protesters had this little concert at the end of their march, and they had a banjo player, but he was strumming it like a guitar instead of that, like plucking it like how you're actually able to use it. So it was just very weird.
You can see that video online. I encourage people to go check it out. It is pretty funny.
Absolutely. And Julio, they're supposed to be the musicians over there on the leftist side. So, we're not even getting the good musicians to come out for the DNC. That's very disappointing. But stay safe out there, and thanks for all the updates.
Thank you.
When we get back, are we really just voting in the Matrix? James Poulos will be blurring the lines between science fiction and reality just ahead. Is the presidential election a simulation? BlazeTV host of Zero Hour James Poulos thinks so. He said so in his latest piece at theblaze.com, and he joins us right now. So James, give us your pitch on why you think the election is a simulation.
Well, Jill, it seems like a joke, but you look around and you start to realize, a lot of what's going on in this election right now just feels like everyone's kind of waiting for some kind of major event that's going to come and replace all this stuff with something real, something that we can actually look at and believe when we see it. You look at the lack of policy coming out of the Harris administration. You look at the weirdness surrounding Tim Walz and the rumors that are still dogging his candidacy on the ticket there. Things like prediction markets. People act as if prediction markets are real. Kamala's up, or no, now Trump is up. I mean, these things can easily be juiced just like polls, and they often are. We're dealing with numbers, we're dealing with images, we're dealing with vibes, all of which have this kind of unreality to them, and which oftentimes feel like a placeholder. I mean, look at the DNC. This is supposed to be the nominated convention of one of the two major parties in the country. Sparsely attended, freakish and strange, tonally bizarre things like Nancy Pelosi sort of mouthing along "We love Joe," even though she was the one who shivved him. They push him all the way to the midnight late show slot. It's all very uncanny. None of it seems seems particularly real. It's a lot of people going through the motions and not acting like they believe this is the actual election that it is purporting to be, or seems to be on paper. So I know it seems strange to put it that way, but as for now, it sure does feel simulated.
Yeah, at first I was thinking of you and the Elon Musk with Rogan meme, just smoking a joint, talking about the simulation. But you put it that way, and when you read his piece, it makes a lot of sense. I think it echoes what a lot of people are feeling and can't put into words. I want to switch gears to X and Brazil. Speaking of the simulation, this is how these levers are manipulated. And what you see here is sort of interesting because on the one hand, you have Brazil saying, you're going to go to jail secretly if you don't do what we want you to do. And on the other hand, in this case, you have X apparently saying, hey, we're going to walk away. What does this tell us?
Well, it's all of a piece with what we see going on in the EU with the strange and frightening claims that they're making about how Elon Musk has to stop allowing certain kinds of speech on his platform or else he's going to run afoul of EU regulations. All of a piece with what's going on in the UK where someone can stand next to a riot and make a sound and find themselves in jail, or post an emoji to social media, find themselves in jail, letting go of actual terrorists from prison to make room for those evil emoji posters. You got to see this all as a piece. There is a digital world war going on. It's been going on for some time. I've talked about this for a while, Matt, and it's you don't need to have one cabal of sort of 10 cigar smoking guys in a tiny room somewhere in order for it to be a concentrated, concerted effort to strike against Musk, what he's doing with this platform. That doesn't mean that Elon Musk is the solution to all the world's problems or even just to yours and mine. But it's clear what's going on here. If they can pull off that kind of kill shot on X, whether it's in Brazil, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in the UK, then the roll-up begins. And today it's some foreign country, and tomorrow it's right here in the United States of America.
And you wrote a separate piece for Return arguing that the United States is becoming China. You mentioned that most people would assume the way to get this is collectivist unity in the West is communism. But you argue that communism is just a halfway step. So what do you mean by that? Can you explain?
Well, sure. You look at the Chinese and how their form of party collectivism differs from what Marx and Engels were talking about. Xi was at one of those party conferences not long ago, at Klaus Schwab sitting in the audience, and he said that actually, class conflict isn't really the essence of what's going on in China. The Chinese feel like they've sort of cracked communism. They understand how to do it in a way that's going to be lasting and durable in a digital age. And certainly, you look at how China's performing, and you stack that up against the old Soviet Union or one of those crappy Eastern European satellites, one of those old SSRs. You can tell that the Chinese are doing things differently, and they're doing things their way. They're not doing things by going back to what some Anglophile German socialists of the mid 1800s said about the utopia that awaits us all. But you fast forward to today, and you look at what's going on in the U.S. Yes, a lot of Americans, it started with probably Tom Friedman in the New York Times wishing that he could just be China for one day. A lot of Americans look at China, they say, well, wait a minute, things seem to be working a lot more smoothly over there than they are here. Maybe in order to beat China, we have to become China. Before the Chinese force communism on us, maybe we need to have our own communism. If you look at what some tech figures are saying, some of them taking the Peter Thiel approach, saying, well, AI is kind of communist, crypto is more libertarian. Let's maybe not do the communist thing. Let's keep America American. But other of these tech guys, especially the ones working on AI, they're starting to say openly, look, we're going to do what Karl Marx wanted. We're going to have infinite plenty and excess for everyone. People will be able to do whatever they want, pursue their wildest dreams. AI will make it possible for them. This is really utopian collectivism. And I think that the ultimate source of that yearning for utopian collectivism is not ideological or some kind of economic impulse. It's really not even a quest for the perfect justice, although that's definitely in the mix. It's really spiritual. It comes down to a spiritual yearning to really return to the Garden of Eden, or barring that, build a Garden of Eden that's even better than the old one, and screw you, God, we don't need you. We're going to do it for ourselves. I think that's a very powerful spiritual yearning, and I think it undergirds a lot of what's going on when Americans do look with some jealousy at China, and when they look at AI, hoping that that's going to collectivize everything and give everyone free money and we all live happily ever after.
James, 30 seconds, the answer to all this. The answer to life, the universe, and everything.
You can do it, James.
Well, look, I think at a first cut, the Constitution is a good thing. America without a Constitution, I think, would pretty quickly slip away into some, bizarre universe that no one really wants to live in, even if maybe it sounds like a good idea to your more crackpot friends. We need to make sure that the Constitution does not stop at text edge. It needs to apply in the real life as well as in cyberspace, and that means extend the First and Second and Fourth Amendments and all those other good ones to technology, to Americans' ability to keep and bear technological arms. Every technology dual use at this point, to be able to associate freely, to speak freely on the internet, to not have unreasonable search, seizure, surveillance, know your customer unto death. All those things need to be reconciled with the Constitution. And I know it seems like a heavy lift, but look at the alternative. This is a heavy lift too. The Federal Reserve, I think, is it, or Bureau of Labor Statistics, one of those agencies, revising down the jobs report by 1 million jobs. The system we have now doesn't work. It's falling apart. Everyone knows it. And the best first place to stop to figure out how to get back on track is the Constitution.
This concludes the speed round with James Poulos. So much information, so little time. James, thanks so much.
Thanks.
You got me sweating.
That's it. A Texas gas station has earned a serious cult following. Our next guest will try to convert you into the Church of Buc-ees. Up next.
I feel so welcomed. Buc-ees.
That's the feeling. If you've ever been to Texas, you may have noticed some gigantic gas stations with an overzealous beaver on the side. So has Buc-ees become a cult? Managing news editor for Blaze News, Leon Wolf, thinks so, but he argues that that's not a bad thing. Leon, it's definitely not a bad thing. So why should Americans drink the Buc-ees Kool-Aid?
Well, they're never going to make you get a weird haircut to start with. I mean, that's point one. I feel like that's not a condition of joining our cult. So if that's your concern, you can set that aside. But in all honesty, I really do struggle to convey the experience. And this is what I tried to do in this article, is just to try to explain what it's like to walk into a Buc-ees for your first time. Because, you think that you're ready when people tell you got to go see this Buc-ees. You're like, all right, a final stop at your gas station. And you think you're ready for what you're going to find when you open those doors, but you're not. And there's not really a great way to convey to people just the sense of wonder about how can all this stuff be in a gas station? It really is something that you have to see for yourself.
So, Leon, break down for us some of those elements, because I feel the same way. I mean, I almost want to say, well, don't play it up too much, right? I mean, don't play it up, because then it'll be disappointing to people. But it really is, as you say in the beginning of this article, the kind of thing where you walk in and go, wait a minute, what is going on here? So break some of that down for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just not possible to oversell the majesty of Buc-ees. I'm not concerned about that at all. It's, I think that the number one thing that is important to understand is that it starts with the basic elements of what you want from a gas station, which is a place to get your gas and go to relieve yourself in as little filth as you possibly can. And Buc-ees nails those two things better than pretty much anyone on the planet. I mean, if you go to a Buc-ees, it's going to be busy. There's going to be a ton of people there, but you shouldn't feel discouraged because they also have like 150 gas pumps at every location. You're never going to sit there and wait for a pump. The gas is going to be cheap. And then point number one, after you kind of pick your jaw up off the floor when you walk in and see everything that's there, is when you go to the bathroom, there's just nothing like a Buc-ees bathroom. My own bathroom is not nearly this good. Then that's because I don't have a person who's in there 24/7 doing nothing but cleaning it day in and day out like Buc-ees does. So, I mean, even if you just stopped right there, I think people would be fanatic about Buc-ees if it didn't have all the rest of the stuff and just had infinity pumps and those restrooms. That would be all that it needed. But in addition to that, they have this crazy, unbelievable assortment of stuff that you can't find anywhere else on the planet. It all sounds insane. And it's all delicious. Like there's just no other way to describe it.
No, I stop every single time. And when I was in Texas, they're here, obviously. When I lived in Tennessee, they were there. Every time I would go from Nashville to Knoxville, we're stopping at Buc-ees. You guys, I don't care how much time it's going to take just to pull off the interstate and go. you do it. But another aspect of Buc-ee's is I feel like their marketing team has also elevated them to cult status. I don't know if you follow them on X. If you don't, you should. They're a great follow, but it's more than just a gas station.
Yeah, I mean, they really have done a tremendous job of just cultivating this feeling of just wanting to belong to something that's so awesome. I mean, the amount of Buc-ee's merch that they sell with the beaver logo on it. I mean, I have got like 2 Buc-ee's World Tour shirts in my house, and it's just like. Something about the place just really makes you feel good. I mean, you just feel like, here are people who are just nailing it. Like they're really proving that it's possible that if you provide excellence day in and day out, that people will respond to that and want to be a part of it. And that's exactly what Buc-ee's is doing.
Okay, let me bring in another objection, right, for this magical, mystical place that we know and love. And I go every time I can as well. My kids, I mean, it's like a pilgrimage for them to get in there. But all good things come to an end, and wouldn't the cynics say, as they expand outside of Texas and across the country, aren't they going to lose their salt? Aren't they going to lose that magic and become just another national chain?
I mean, we hope not, but I mean, the expansion has gotten pretty extensive already, and I think that they've kept, really the soul of what it is that they're trying to do. I really can't imagine, because I've read a lot about kind of the inception of Buc-ee's and what Art Chaplin's vision of the place was, even from the very beginning. I can't imagine him being willing to cut corners on what he's always wanted to deliver, which is just a feeling of giving people who go to a gas station the feeling that they're having a deluxe experience. That's not something that you're not used to getting a deluxe experience when you go to a gas station. And I feel like, given how he understands that is the focal point of their brand, and given that they are a privately owned company, I believe it's 50-50 with him and another individual, they do not have pressure from these activist investors to try to change doing this or that, make their food less diabetes friendly, if you will, whatever else it is that you might want to say. I think that as long as it stays with him, it's going to be consistent to that vision, what she's always had.
Last question in about 30 seconds. With all that in mind, what do you see as Buc-ee's future? How high can they go? How bright can this get?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's difficult to know. The meme is the European mind cannot comprehend, and I think there might be some truth to that. Like, you tried to open a Buc-ee's in Paris, it might not succeed. But I do think North America and Canada, I think that it'll be kind of the crown jewel. It will be the standard nationwide by which all other truck stocks are judged before long.
That is so well said. Leon, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And Peterson, I know in your office you have a little Buc-ee's little cup.
Yeah, it's one of the only things I have in my office.
Yeah,
it's a little. It's called a buckshot.
There it is. And you're ready to go with your Buc-ee's. I'm
sponsor earlier. Maybe we should get a buckshot. And
we should. I mean, with all this time that we've spent on them, we should get some merch. Or I would also be paid in their breakfast burritos, because those are delicious.
Okay, the thing that got me is the jerky. It's the deli of jerky. You just go to this deli, and it's just nothing but different kinds of jerky. And that's when I was like, okay.
This is your place. We can hang here. This is good. These are the vibes for the show. Kamala Harris loves the vibes. We love the beef jerky vibes. So if you love the beef jerky vibes, if you love the BTN vibes, go ahead and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to rate and review the show. It helps others to find it. We will break it back down here tomorrow night.